After a week of cross-border violence, Pakistan and Afghanistan agreed to an immediate ceasefire. Islamabad accuses its neighbour of harbouring armed groups, allegations that Kabul denies. So will this lead to lasting peace? And how does the conflict play out regionally? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Adrian Finighan. Pakistan and Afghanistan have agreed to stop fighting after talks in the Qatari capital, Doha. Cross-border violence in the past week or so marked the most serious escalation since 2021, when the Taliban returned to power in Afghanistan. Islamabad accuses Kabul of harbouring fighters from Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, the TTP, an armed group that stepped up attacks in Pakistan. Afghanistan's Taliban leaders deny the accusations. Mediators say that the foundations have been laid for long-term peace. But if the attacks on Pakistan continue, and if Islamabad suspects fighters are operating from Afghan territory, will the ceasefire hold? We'll discuss that and more with our panel of guests in just a moment. But first, a report from Ferdy Akar.
After a week of the worst violence between Afghanistan and Pakistan since the Taliban returned to power in 2021, the two countries agreed to an immediate ceasefire at negotiations in Doha. Qatar, which mediated the talks along with Turkey, says the deal establishes the mechanisms for lasting peace. The dispute began earlier in October, when Afghanistan accused Pakistan of carrying out strikes on its territory. Islamabad says it targeted armed groups.
Both the countries, Afghanistan and Pakistan, should make serious efforts to bring the terrorists under control and eliminate terrorism from this region.
Pakistan's intelligence service has long been accused of supporting the Taliban since the early 1990s. But far from the stable border and friendly ties Islamabad might have hoped for, relations soured. Pakistan accuses Afghanistan of harbouring fighters from Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, the TTP, which Kabul denies.
We neither brought the TTP here nor supported them, nor did they come during our time. The TTP existed here during Ashraf Ghani's era. After our victory, TTP's leaders and fighters all went back to the tribal areas. They're not present here anymore.
The Afghan Taliban and the TTP emerged from the same ethnic Pashtun anti-Soviet resistance movement in the 1980s. The TTP formed in Pakistan in 2007 as the Afghan Taliban was fighting its long war against the US-led coalition. While the Afghan Taliban's leadership opposed the TTP's attacks on Pakistani forces, they were seen as ideologically and strategically linked. During the fighting earlier this month, both Pakistan and Afghanistan say they caused major damage, with civilians killed and wounded in both countries.
Only ordinary people lived here. No Taliban fighters or government officials lived in this house. And most of the women and children, innocent people, were killed.
Communities on both sides of the 2,600-kilometre border have been left in limbo after the violence halted trade and travel. With Pakistan and Afghanistan pledging to restore peace and stability, there is cautious hope that they can settle their differences. Ferdy Akar, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
Let's bring in our guests. From Islamabad, we're joined by Javaid Ur-Rahman, an investigative journalist and parliamentary correspondent for The Nation, a Pakistani daily newspaper. From Washington, D.C., we're joined by Elizabeth Threlkeld, a senior fellow and director of the South Asia programme at the Stimson Centre. And from Kabul, we're joined by Obaidullah Bahir, an adjunct lecturer at the American University of Afghanistan. A warm welcome to you all. Javaid, let's start with you. The recent, let's call it, downward spiral in relations between the two nations would have been hard to imagine when Pakistan welcomed the Taliban's return to power in 2021. What's gone wrong?
Thank you very much. Pakistan has welcomed the recent agreement between the two countries hopefully it will bring peace between the two countries. And now these two countries will again meet on October 20 and 25. Actually, the Pakistan has focused in these talks that cross-border terrorism who are entering from Afghanistan side will not happen again. And any terrorist attack from Pakistan, from Afghanistan, will not be tolerated. Pakistan has made it clear to the Afghanistan in these 5 hours long talks that Hafiz Gul Bahadur related attacks are carrying out activities in Pakistan. Pakistan is actually sharing 2,500 kilometer porous border with Afghanistan, and skirmishes and other conflicts are increasing day by day. So there was a need to give a clear message to Afghanistan because of the growing romance between Afghanistan and India. It was really very important and need of the hour to convey the message that any attack from Afghanistan will not be tolerated.
Elizabeth, how much influence does the Afghan Taliban have over the Pakistan Taliban, the TTP? Does it have the capability, indeed the political will, to rein it in? I mean, can it stand by the ceasefire that it's signed up to here in Doha?
Thanks very much for having me. Certainly was encouraging to see that a ceasefire was reached, and not just a ceasefire, but a recognition that there is going to be a need for continued dialogue and ideally a mechanism that will be put in place between the two sides to take this forward. That said, getting to your question, I remain somewhat skeptical of the durability of the ceasefire because there are multiple actors in the scenario. This was negotiation between Afghanistan and Pakistan, but the TTP and other groups that are loosely aligned with it are not parties to these talks or necessarily subject to the agreements. And so the onus does fall on the Afghan Taliban to try to take action and curtail their activities. And I think that is that's always going to be a challenge. This is an incredibly porous border, even with Pakistan's efforts to put up fencing. It is really, really difficult to have the capacity and the manpower to be able to shut down these sorts of infiltration. But also, as your report at the top indicated, there are ideological affiliations between the two sides. And this is politically sensitive as well, domestically within Afghanistan. We can look to previous offers that have been put on the table. A few months ago, the talk was about the Afghan Taliban seeking to relocate TTP members to places like Ghazni, away from the border. That doesn't seem to have come to fruition. So, unfortunately, while I hope that the ceasefire will be the start of something else, I think the TTP is an angle here that will be particularly challenging for the Afghan Taliban to rein in, assuming that they have the best of intentions there. This is quite difficult.
Obaidullah, but I mean, feel free to come back on what Elizabeth was saying there on the durability of this ceasefire. But I want to ask you what the TTP is. When was it formed? Does it predate the Afghan Taliban? What are its aims? What's its beef with the government in Islamabad?
Hi, Adrian. Thank you for having me on. First off, yes, the TTP predates the Afghan Taliban coming to power. That's an important conversation to remember. The fact that the Pakistani regime has had issues with successive Afghan governments over the TTP topic. And here you have to understand that there is a false equivalency that takes shape in the rhetoric of Pakistan and in the words of your Pakistani guest, where they equate the attacks of the TTP as attacks by Afghanistan. So here we're confusing influence for absolute control. As you asked Elizabeth, and she pointed out, there's a certain limitation that has to be recognized. There's only so much that the Afghan Taliban can convince the TTP to do. However, considering that the Afghan Taliban, in the absence of the TTP and any negotiations with them, will just be able to convince the TTP to drop all their political goals, how we're going to approach any conflict. The fact that Pakistan took matters into their own hands, they adopted the model that India implemented against them, that Israel is implementing against the world, where if they're attacked by an insurgent group and they assume they're operating from somewhere, they will bomb civilians in return. There has to be a condemnation for that. There has to be a pledge to stop that before we can even get to a point where a dialogue can happen. So the ceasefire, I am not very hopeful regarding it, because there has to be a change in attitudes, majorly on the Pakistani side, and then a recognition of what the Afghan Taliban can actually do and realistically move towards that.
Javaid, what's the mood in Islamabad towards the Taliban in Afghanistan right now? How much bandwidth is this issue, the ceasefire, occupying there in Islamabad? Column inches, if you like. How preoccupied are the media and indeed the government with what's going on in the border region right now?
Actually, unstable Afghanistan is not favor of in the region. It seems that Fitna al-Khawarij, TTP, is out of control. They are using the Afghanistan soil easily. The rate of the government in Afghanistan is a bit weak. They need to control it. They need to check it. And Pakistan has conveyed it to Afghanistan so many times that even extortionists there from Afghanistan are making calls to Pakistani soils. They need to check it. India's supports for various proxies are also the matter of concern. They need to check it. So many issues are there. Hopefully, these peace talks will work, and Afghanistan should seriously think about it.
Elizabeth, I mean, feel free to come back on anything that Javaid was saying there. I also want to come back to the durability of the ceasefire and the importance of the mediation of both Qatar and Turkey in reaching this ceasefire. If it were to hold, I mean, what would it take to stop it unravelling? Neither side can afford a protracted conflict. Can either Qatar or Turkey offer somehow guarantees to make sure that it holds?
I think that is a quite difficult prospect. Again, it is good that the two sides sat down and reached an agreement, right? Just looking at rhetoric that has been used over the past week, some that has come to my attention has been concerning the Pakistan side is that in official statements, Pakistan has started referring to the Taliban as a regime, right, which was a quite different framing than their previous focus on engagement, and some suggestions that Pakistan is, openly flirting with the idea of regime change in some way in Afghanistan, of calling the Taliban illegitimate. And while that might well be for domestic consumption, for political signaling, I'm not necessarily suggesting that is on the table, certainly, but it's meaningful in terms of the tone and tenor of the rhetoric. And so the very fact that the two sides were able to come together and sit down and hash out an agreement is something that is positive and that I think we should look to build on. Here is where I think avenues like trade are quite significant and important. The report that you shared earlier noted just the disruption to lives across both sides of the trend line here. And there is room to reopen negotiations for the Afghanistan-Pakistan trade and transit agreement, for example, to start getting a little bit of momentum, because as Pakistan's foreign policy over the past few years has tried to shift from, as they say, geopolitics to geoeconomics, with very tense relations to the east with India, Pakistan really needs to look to the West for that connectivity onwards to places like Central Asia, for example. And without a stable relationship with Afghanistan, that's not going to be a possibility. And so I think the economic impulse is one that actually both sides, Afghanistan and Pakistan, could see benefits from. And so thinking about early wins there. But again, come back to the unfortunate likelihood that we will see a continuation of attacks attacks, perhaps from the TTP. And so what I will be watching is how both sides handle that. For example, if we see any condemnation from the Afghan side of future TTP attacks in line with this agreement, or if we see kind of continued obfuscation over where the TTP is based and whether these are from Afghan soil or from Pakistani soil, which seems more likely at this point.
Obadallah, isolated as it is, can Afghanistan afford not to rein in the TTP and make sure that this ceasefire survives intact? I mean, how interdependent are the two nations, Pakistan and Afghanistan? How much does Afghanistan need Pakistan right now?
I mean, both countries need each other. We're natural trade partners with each other. We're the shortest route to each other. Afghanistan lies in the heart of Asia. It is a connector to the rest of the world within Asia. So there has to be a realization like that. But for that to happen, you have to have rational thinking. And the thing is that in the past 40, 50 years, we've seen a constant support from the Pakistani government towards anti-state regimes. They supported the Taliban when they were fighting. They supported every other group in the past 40 years that were fighting the state. So this idea that, okay, I understand that you have an existential crisis with India and that there is a siege mentality going on there, but the siege mentality is spreading towards all your neighbors. When you're constantly looking at the world through a militaristic lens, the Pakistani regime has had in the past 22 months fights with military hostilities with India, with Iran, with Afghanistan now. And there has to be a renewed approach to this obsession of seeing everything through an anti-India lens. As your guest from Pakistan, in his words, said that, why is Afghanistan getting close to India? There has to be a realization that it is natural for an independent neighbor to have their own independent foreign policy in a world where that is not allowed, in a world where there is a demand of control. So a realistic approach would be understand that, okay, if the TTP does exist, and this is the very same TTP that emerged within Pakistan that was sheltered by the Pakistani establishment, the very same Gul Bahadur mentioned in this interview was an asset of the Pakistani regime. He was called and labeled a good Taliban until they attacked his home and he became an anti-state element. So a lot of these groups operated with the direction of the Pakistani establishment, now lumping all your problems. Okay, fine. Let's take for the sake of argument the TTP is being sponsored and supported by Afghanistan. Who's supporting the BLA? Who's supporting all the other political turmoil that's happening within Pakistan, whether it's the PTI, whether it's the PTM, BYC, TLP? All these are problems, and scapegoating isn't the solution unless you put your head down and talk about your internal problems and stop blaming Afghanistan for everything. Yes, the Taliban have an influence over the TTP, and they use that to mediate between you and the TTP, a party that you are willing to politically negotiate with. Then why do you get to a point where you're going to bomb Kabul and Kandahar because somehow TTP is attacking you? There has to be some rational thinking involved for us in this region to ever move towards something that is collectively beneficial to everyone.
Mm-hmm. Javaid, how do you answer that? Where does India fit into this picture? Not only does Islamabad accuse Kabul of cozying up to New Delhi, it also alleges that the TTP is backed by India.
Actually, there is a need to understand that Pakistan has been hosting the Afghanistan citizens for the last 2 decades. In return, what we are facing that Afghanistan soils is being used by the TTP, and they are not seeing it. They are not controlling their activity. Actually, the rate of the government in Afghanistan is a bit weak. They need to control it. When Pakistan talk about the Afghanistan is demanding $10 billion for the peace. When Pakistan talk about the guarantees, they are keeping mum on it. They remain silent on it. They need to give some guarantee so that Pakistan will keep Pakistan work on the peace. Now I am hopeful that these peace talk will work if some of the point that I have mentioned, that Afghanistan will work on that points.
Elizabeth, what's your take on all of this? how concerned should Islamabad be about Kabul's relations with India? Kabul alleges that Pakistan's border area shelters fighters who are aligned with ISIL, with the tacit backing of elements within the Pakistan military. I mean, is all of this just part of the misinformation war, or are there any substance to either side's allegations?
So this is a space that is, to be honest, very quite difficult to get a firm handle on what's actually happening in terms of financial support, of intelligence support, of anything that would go beyond that in terms of military support. And so I think it's important for us as analysts to come in with a bit of humility there. As we say in the academic literature, the causes of insurgency and militancy in Pakistan's border regions are overdetermined, which is to say there are many different sources of potential grievances or of gains that militants could look to take. The ideologies there, funding opportunities through extortion, through kidnapping, perhaps through external support. And so I think it would be wise to take a step back and realize that, for example, in the early days following the Taliban takeover in 2021, when we started to see a slow ramp up of attacks, and India really had very little presence in Afghanistan. Nonetheless, these attacks were coming back up and the TTP was getting going. And so to say that Indian support is the only determining factor driving the TTP right now, that I think would be going far beyond what we can see from the facts. But it is notable, right, that India is, I think, taking advantage of this moment of opening and warming relations with Pakistan or with Afghanistan to send a message to Pakistan. We had the Taliban foreign minister in New Delhi. We're hearing about warming relations between the two sides, an elevation of their diplomatic relationship. And given the crisis that we saw play out earlier this year in May between India and Pakistan, it is in the interest of the entire region to ensure that whatever bilateral disputes exist between the various players don't merge into a broader regional conflict where we see some sort of proxy action that would be taking place in Afghanistan or elsewhere. And so this is where, coming back to the ceasefire announcement, and not just the ceasefire, but the follow-on mechanisms, it will be vitally important to ensure that Afghanistan and Pakistan and India have opportunities to clear the air about what is and isn't happening, to recognize Obadullah's point that these are legitimate international relations that can happen between the two sides. But given understanding of regional threat perceptions, it's very important to be communicative in advance so that we don't fall prey to misperceptions or inadvertent escalation that could be quite troubling in a region like this.
Obaidullah, we mustn't forget, of course, that we're talking about a situation that impacts the lives of ordinary people. As the two countries disagree and there are armed groups operating in this border region. What is life like right now for people who are living there?
I mean, I've said this to friends. I mean, Afghans know war better than other people know sleep. So, and here's where this thinking should emerge, right? Afghanistan, if you think you're going to bomb Afghanistan into submission, then you have learned nothing from the 20 years of the war on terror and the 20 years of American occupation. So the point is, you're only increasing the cost of compliance on the Taliban's end. When you bomb civilians and you kill civilians, there's going to be a bitter taste. There's going to be public pressure on the Taliban to not concede any ground. So we have to understand that the Afghan nation is a resilient nation. We've had decades of war. We are willing to go to war again if need be, but it's not a preference. We've always preferred dialogue and a conversation, specifically with our neighbors that we really can't move away from. But when you have wild allegations, unsubstantiated allegations like Afghanistan wants $10 billion, which I really don't understand where your guest got from, but you have to also understand that the very same accusation, for example, we heard twice that the Afghan Taliban don't have a writ on their territory. Now, this is the exact same argument that for the past 20 years, whenever the Afghan government would turn towards Pakistan and say, why are anti-state elements operating from your territory? Their argument would be, well, it's very difficult to police this border area, right? But then somehow it is policeable. I mean, I can travel anywhere I want in Afghanistan in the Taliban regime right now. Security is that good. But then constantly lumping everything on Afghanistan, and also look at the TTP targeting, right? So we had a week-long bombing campaign that happened from Pakistan. They said there were precision strikes. They said they were going to bomb TTP targets. They said they were going to bomb Wali Masood, and they killed him. His video and his audio came out. He's in the tribal area. He's alive. He's well. Then they said they bombed Hafiz Gul Bahadur's group in my home district of Urgun 2 days ago, and then we have pictures of children and women and cricket players that were dead there. So the idea is, if you constantly keep blaming Afghanistan for TTP and you have no evidence, and whenever you're conducting strikes, you're not getting anywhere, there has to be a realization that we're not getting anywhere.
Obaidullah, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We're rapidly running out of time. I just want to give Javaid a right to reply to what you just heard there.
As my colleague mentioned, that Pakistan has no evidence. Pakistan has all the evidences. Pakistan has conveyed in these 5-hour-long talks that Pakistan has each and every evidence in its hands, and it has conveyed that in case of any insurgency, it would be dealt with full force. So Afghanistan need to see its soil, how they why you are not accepting that Afghanistan has fully out of the control. There is no control on your borders. Pakistan, the rate of the government is not at your soil. You need to control TTP.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Unfortunately, we can't get into a debate about this. Elizabeth, I've got about 20 or 30 seconds left for a final say.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I mean, you can hear just in the context of this conversation that tensions are very high right now. And what is needed is a step back, where even if we recognize that we are not likely to solve the many underlying issues in this relationship, that doesn't mean that we need to lean further into kinetic escalation between the two sides. So I think it is in the interest of all sides, and indeed outside players like Qatar and Turkey, to take steps to try to bring this forward.
There, I'm afraid we must end it. Many thanks indeed to you all for taking part in the programme today. Javaid Ur-Rahman, Elizabeth Threlkeld and Obaidullah Bahir. And thanks for watching. You can see the programme again at any time by going to the website. That's at aljazeera.com. For further discussion, you can join us at our Facebook page. You'll find that at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. Or, of course, you can join the conversation on X. Our handle there at AJ Inside Story. From me, Adrian Finighan, and the team here in Doha. We'll see you again. Bye for now.